whole screen is filled up. My whole screen is filled up now. So if you have a chat question, just interrupt me, Jay. So also, Jay, this needs to be translated, right? So I speak for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then let it be translated?
No. Just continue, okay? Because English subtitle simultaneous at the bottom of the window, okay? So just keep your pace, okay? So
all right, that's good. So AI, no more translation.
Exactly,
Okay.
that's better for you.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so you're all guys ready? Then I will approve all the attendees right now.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Good, great. 네, 시작하셔도 됩니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 저는 안홍주라고 합니다. 지금 LA에서 제작자로 프로듀서를 하고 있는데 지금은 잠깐 한국에 나와 있습니다. 여러분과 같은 시간에 오후 시간에 제가 잠깐 사회를 보고 있고 오늘 주제는 고지 드린 대로 몇 차례 국내에서 이런 제목을 가지고 전에도 한 적이 있지만은 오늘도 이제 모든 게 스토리로 시작해서 스토리로 끝나니까 오늘도 대신 다른 그 강사 연사를 모시고 할리우드에서 일반적으로 애니메이션의 그 개발 전 과정을 비록 한 시간 짧은 시간이지만 그 장편 영화, TV 시리즈 약간 접근 방법이 다르지만 오늘 한 1시간 한 4, 50분 정도 하고 끝난 뒤에 그 Q&A 세션을 갖도록 하고 그다음에 영어로 계속 크리스 핸더슨이 하면 밑에 영어로 자막이 뜨는 걸로 이해를 하고 있습니다. 저는 여러분 볼 수도 없고 여러분은 저를 보는지 모르겠지만 하고 크리스 핸더슨은 디즈니를 비롯한 애니메이션 극장용 시리즈 프로듀싱 경력만 거의 30년 이상 된 베테랑 프로듀서고 저하고도 한 10년 정도 같이 일을 했고 지금도 몇 작품을 특히 극장용도 같이 하고 있는 개발하고 제작하고 있는 그런 프로였습니다. 그래서 제 소개는 간단히 마치고 이제 크리스 앤더슨이 한 40분, 50분 정도 하면 여러분 영어 이해되시는 분들은 바로바로 이해를 하시고 좀 안 되시는 분들은 자막을 열심히 보셔서 이해를 하시고 궁금하신 거는 짧은 질문은 끝나고 하시고 나중에 정말 궁금한 거는 이메일로 정리를 해주시면 다 취합해서 나중에 이메일로 답을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 그러면 준비되신 걸로 알고 크리스한테 마이크를 넘기겠습니다. Chris, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So we'll talk today about basically the development process that we go through here. And let's start with, oops, got to get this over here like this. Oh, okay. Let me see. Okay, we're working. Okay,
Yeah.
so we can start with IP, which is stands for intellectual property. It's very important to understand the many things about IP, which we'll talk about here. What we want to talk about is how we can identify an IP, and once we have that, we want to make sure that it's has a legally in order, so that we can then take it in and start to develop it, and eventually, hopefully, try to sell it. We'll talk about the various steps we go through once we find an IP, how we go through things like research, to identify the target audience. Sometimes it's really important that you have to tell the buyer how do you think the best way is to market this property to eventual audience. Okay, so we'll go through the whole process here. So one of the things we can start with is talking about the types of IP right now. There's some basic types. This is an example of what we would call an original IP versus something that's a known IP. An original IP, a good example here is the IP called Bluey, which is very successful. Now, is challenging. The most difficult IP to sell is an original IP because it doesn't have a known audience, and that the buyers now are more inclined to want to buy known IP. Now, in some cases, an original IP is created by someone who's also created another show. So that creator is kind of the brand. Like Keith Chapman created Bob the Builder a long time ago. So when he came with Paw Patrol, which was an original idea, the broadcaster, the streamer knew to say it's from the creator of Bob the Builder. So it wasn't really like an original. The next level up would be something like this title called 100% Wolf, which was developed by a studio in Australia. It was a book, comic book or a book, but with kind of small number of sale. But they believed in the property. They thought it had a really cool concept about a wolf who gets magically turned into a pink poodle. This Australian company also has a parent company in Europe who also supported the property by saying, we will distribute the series and we will help you build the brand. So they took something that was not an original and not a major brand, and they brought it up together through strong commitment to production, commitment to distribution, commitment to consumer products. So that's, you can have this level. Then we get into things like How to Train Your Dragon, which is based on a book, really. And like, this is a book called A Tale Dark and Grim, which I'll show you a little bit later. But these are things you look for that are books that have been something like a New York Times bestseller. There's another book, it's called Max in the Land of Lies, also a #1 best-selling book, New York Times bestseller. These are IPs that when you go in, they're a little harder to secure the rights because there's more demand, but it's also more appealing when you develop it and take it to a potential buyer, whether it's Netflix or Disney or somebody like that. Then the last and the big one is these major global brands, which Batman or Roald Dahl Library, and these are generally owned by the big studios because to secure these brands costs a lot of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars, but they have a huge audience. So these are like the sort of breakdowns we look at when we talk about IP. When you get into identifying your IP that you feel that you believe in, that you want to develop, it's kind of important that you look at, I'm going to go with comparables first. The comparables are things like you give 2 or 3 shows that are similar. In your head, you have to understand how those worked. You look at them and you say what worked or what didn't work. It's always important to look at the success stories, but it's also important to look at something similar developed and sold and produced that didn't do well. Well, what can you learn from that? Okay. So once you have all of the kind of an understanding of the IP you want to identify, you believe in, and you think you know the target audience through understanding these comparables, there's some business side that you really need to understand that a lot of people make mistakes in this area, and that's what we call a chain of title. You need to have a clean chain of title. And there's 2 ways. There's pre your deal with this IP and after you secure this IP. So pre you getting this is something like, say you've identified an IP that was a TV series once 10 years ago, and the IP owner tells you, oh, it's clean, there's no problem. You can take their word for it, or you should have a lawyer look at it to make sure, because a lot of times the IP owner isn't aware that there could be a chain of title problem. Maybe they had a partnership with 2 other companies or broadcasters or something 10 years ago, but they didn't understand how long the terms are, for example, So you can get into developing and you take it and you try to sell it, you get it out there, maybe you have some success, only to find out that the buyer of this, your development now, says, oh, we did research and there's a problem with your chain of title. Then that will kill your project. So you want to make sure before you commit to optioning or making a deal on an IP that you like, it's worth the money to really do some research on the chain of title to make sure it's clean. Then there is what happens after you secure this IP and you want to develop it. You bring in writers, you'll bring in visual development, you might bring in a song creator. All of these deals with all of these artists need to be very clear about who owns this IP that they're creating, who owns the artwork for this IP. So you want to make sure you have what we call really solid contracts that are specifying things like this is a work for hire, work made for hire. That means you own this art, or you in some form of a collaboration with the IP owner own this artwork. So that's maintaining clean chain of title after you secure it while you're in development. So one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure you understand your target audience. And TV is broken down into basic categories of preschool. What we call here is bridge, which is ages 4 to 8. And then the next age up is kids 6 to 9. And so you want to develop both the writing and the look when you know what your target audience is. Typically, we know that preschool tends to want to be CG animation, or typically we know that the older kids, they kind of like more 2D design shows. The older kids will want more sophisticated writing. So you understand your target audience. The other thing to understand is the toy potential. You have to understand that at these age groups, preschool and bridge are still very much into toys, but when you get into older, the kids' content, they've now moved away from toys and are into gaming things. So when you develop, you don't want to develop a show that has strong toy potential, but you're aiming it at kids 6 to 9 or 6 to 11. That's not a good strategy. You would want to look at something that kids 6 to 11 would have a good gaming potential or something along those lines. So on the movie side, we tend to call this a 4-quadrant audience. That's the safest way to go into knowing your target audience. There is, for example, Paw Patrol is a preschool show here and been very, very successful. Nickelodeon and Paramount wanted to do movies, and they had to come up with a decision. The movie, typical movie for a preschool audience, has a smaller box office return, a smaller audience. So then it's smart to have a smaller budget. That budget might be something like $10 million for a North American release. That's a small budget for a preschool IP. But Paramount decided to take a little bit more of a risk, and they spent $25 million on it, and they were hoping to achieve a 4-quadrant audience. 4-quadrant means male and female and over and under 25. So mom and dad will like it, and brother and sister will all enjoy this movie. And they were very successful because they had over $120 million box office. So it was so successful that they decided, let's do Paw Patrol 2. And now they're in production on Paw Patrol 3, which is my last bullet point here, which is franchise potential is always something. And because of Paw Patrol and because of the franchise potential, we're starting to see more TV shows being developed as movies because they're coming with a brand. We went back to original IP, whether it's an original or an emerging IP or a known IP. These TV series like Paw Patrol was already a big IP. It had a lot of fans. It had a lot of following. So that was less risk, and they decided to spend more money on it. So there are ways that, like I said before, we need to do research. You need to try to do as much research as you can. It's like we have a thing we call taking a general meeting. A general meeting is you know who is in charge of kids content at Netflix. So you reach out to their office and you say, we're this company. We have several properties, but we'd like to know what you're looking for. So can we have a general meeting? This meeting is not to pitch anything. This meeting is just to have time to talk with this buyer and asking them. They're very open and happy to tell you that they might say, we actually have too much preschool. We don't have enough for boys action adventure. Or they might say, what we're really looking for now is adult animation. I've been in a lot of general meetings and came away with some pretty good understanding of what the buyers are looking for. So you might want to try to find out a way that you can have a general meeting with the potential buyer. So that's one bit of research. It's always important to be able to, like I said, have comparable films, comparable series, and also know how successful they were. Again, that comes through your research, because that will be part of your introduction when you tell them, I want to pitch you an idea that's boys action adventure similar to, and you can give an example that they will know. And then they know, oh, okay, you're going to pitch me an idea that's similar to this. When we talk about budget logic, the point here is you might want to develop your show with the scope, the number of challenges in production that match what you think the budget should be, because every time you get into a project, you need to do a profit and loss scenario. And you need to know that what the buyers are willing to spend. So you try not to make a big epic adventure with a cast of thousands when you know that this is probably going to be a low budget movie. So therefore you limit your locations, you limit your cast, you keep your stories more simple. So that's understanding the budget logic. You need that when you're developing. The last point here is a big point, and it actually probably should have its own big meeting, like a 1 hour meeting about it. And it's basically that YouTube is becoming the dominant platform here in the US, probably globally, because the buyers are going through some budget restrictions now. They're more cautious about what they buy. They are spending less money. They're looking for more partnerships. They're looking for more well-known brands. These are the current trends with the buyers. But one of the things they're looking at is something that's been built on YouTube through this digital first strategy that is developing an audience. The streamers are excited about that. They will approach these content creators on, say, a YouTube channel, and then they will bring that show into Netflix, and they will fund a series out of that. That's happening quite often now. So what we're finding is that there are specialists who understand how you can build your brand on YouTube. It's different. It's a lot different than the development and the format to take something to a Netflix. On YouTube, you create a lot more really short form content, and you have to do a lot more new content so that it's refreshing all the time. You don't really do one 20-minute episode. You would create 7 3-minute episodes so that it's constantly new content. And that makes the algorithm of YouTube bring more viewers to you. There's a lot of things that I could talk about on YouTube. I'm still learning it, but it's new. It's the future. I would say really try to understand that. So when we get into development, having done all that research, and I'll show you, I'm going to just take you through a couple of decks at the end of this, which will show you what we've done when we developed something and sold it to Netflix. But basically, like I showed you, books. What are your sources? Ideas, comic books. A real event is often a situation you can turn into a story. For a feature film, you want a pitch that has a lot about, if it's book-based, what are the values of the book? How many sales has it made? What's the target audience? What are the comparables? If you have a script, that's fantastic. Buyers would love it if you have a script. Generally, you just have a treatment, which tells what the story is. And if you're successful when you pitch this, they will say the next step is, let's do a script. For a TV series, you go in, you got to know what your target audience is. It's helpful to know what the tone and style are, like, the project we sold to Netflix, which I'll show you, is A Tale Dark and Grim. We really wanted to make sure that Netflix understood the tone, that it had comedy and horror. It wasn't just horror, it had comedy in it. So that's tonally what you got to get right. Design and style comes as part of the pitch. So in a TV series, it's a little bit more about the bona fides of the IP, the strengths and weaknesses of your core characters. Is it serialized or is it standalone episodes? Serialized meaning that it has a seasonal arc, like episode one ends, episode 2 begins at the end of episode 1. These are serialized. Standalones mean you can watch any episode in any order and understand the story. You don't have to follow it from beginning to end. There's also, now it's very important that all of the buyers are looking for things that have something to do with social messaging, children's mental health, because there's a generation now who've grown up with a phone and that's all they've known. So they have just a different life than we have. They don't have as much physical activity or physical friendships. There's almost everything is online or in a digital world. So we try to encourage children's mental health. That's the whole writing the story side. While you're doing that simultaneously, we are visually developing it. So we want to be able to, when we go into a pitch, we need to be able to have visual art that shows our buyer what we think this project's going to look and feel like. So when I take you through the development deck, you'll get a sense of where that is. This is this show, A Tale Dark and Grim, and it's based on this book, which is a New York Times bestseller, which I read to my son when he was 7 years old, and we loved it. So I reached out. I found out about the book option. It became available. We partnered with someone who had development money. We optioned the book. We sat around and started developing the story based on the book. Each chapter was going to be an episode. It was serialized. I had done my research. I knew what Netflix was looking for. I knew that they loved serialized shows. I knew that they loved shows that played for a 4-quadrant audience now. They didn't want animation only for 6 to 9 or 4 to 8. They wanted all the family to enjoy it. So I knew that was there. I knew they were developing some horror comedy genre and tone series. So when I went in, I basically was able to tell them, I know this is what you're looking for. I also recruited artists and talent that I knew Netflix had already approved of. So when we went in, it was an amazing pitch. They basically said yes in the room. So I'll just tell you what we did was we developed the visuals, which were the characters, the setting, what time in the world, where in the world it took place, and what period it took place. Our characters were Hansel and Gretel. We did sketches. We had set pieces for 6 or so of the episodes. There were 10 episodes. We had a treatment in our pitch deck. When you do your deliverables, there tends to be 2 forms of deliverables for development. One is what we call the in-person pitch, or a virtual pitch now, like a Zoom pitch, which is almost all images and no text, because you're telling the buyer what you want them to hear. The second thing that we do is called a leave behind, which is a deck that has all the writing in it of everything we said with the visuals. So it reads like a children's book with visuals and text together. That's called the leave behind. And quite often when I start a pitch, I say, you don't have to take notes. We have a leave behind, which we can send you a link to. And they're very thankful, because that means they can just enjoy the pitch. And then after the pitch, I'm going to send them the leave behind for for them to take to their coworkers and say, hey, I had a nice pitch. Here's the leave behind. So that their coworkers who weren't in our pitch will understand. So the timeline, just so you know, we started developing it in November of 2018 for a pitch in Netflix late January 2019. And at that pitch, we pretty much got a yes from Melissa Cobb, who was the head of All Kids and All Animation. Then in March of 2019, she asked us to pitch it to the TV series department. So we did, and they said yes. That was in March of 2019. So in April or May, they gave us $100,000 to write a script and do a visual development test, a proof of concept. That was spring. By end of summer and fall, we were done with the script. We were done with the visual development test, and they were reviewing it at Netflix. So by December, we got our green light. And in January of 2020, we started production. And so it took 14 months. And believe it or not, that's actually really fast. So I just want to give you that sort of sensibility. I'll show you the deck we took into Netflix. So understanding financial strategy is important. And there are different ways things get financed. If you go into Netflix and they agree and they say yes to your pitch, they finance it. But that's getting harder and harder to find now. So this is sort of a funding scenario for something like a movie, which we do quite a bit. There are 3 kinds of money, and the money has to be compatible. There's equity, which is just like cash. And equity has a position of more ownership because of the way they get paid back in the revenue. There are pre-sales, which is also kind of a debt scenario, meaning pre-sales are like a forecast of a sale in a territory. Once you get all these pre-sales, that becomes bankable. So you go to the bank, and the bank will make a loan against those projections, which is debt. So in your recouping, the waterfall, debt comes out first, equity comes out after that. And then there's soft money. Soft money are like tax credits or subsidies that come out of Canada and Europe and places like that. I can show you a little example of what a forecast looks like. So this is going to be hard for you to see, but basically this is a third-party company that gives us scenarios of low, middle, and high projections. This is the domestic box office. This is things like consumer products and merchandising. This is the international box office. Again, consumer products. These are second windows like TV sales. So you have these revenues, then you have these expenses, and then you have this recoupment. And at the end down here, basically tells you what the return on investment is for your investors. Again, low, middle, and high. This is third-party company. They do this for a fee. We and that company select the comparable movies. It's generally 20 titles. So you pick winners and losers so that it's a fair, comparable resource to determine these projection numbers. I'm going to show you this in another deck. This is a pie chart of where recoupment happens, but I lost some of the numbers when we put it into this slide. I'm going to jump ahead to pitching here. Again, like I said, research it first. What are they buying? Know your target audience. When you start to create your deck, you work out the story beats, the writing, the artwork. Typical contents are log lines and synopses, beat outlines, which take your buyer through what the story's about. Characters, you want to talk about their strengths, their flaws, their weaknesses, what's at stake if they fail. That's their character arc. You want to show them visually what this world looks and feels like. And key moments are like a beat in an episode where something very important happens. It's very important for the buyers to see bios on the team. They want to know that the people that are in this pitch actually know what they're doing and know how to deliver something if they greenlight it. And then the target demos and comps like we've talked about. In movies, it's more important, I think, to emphasize the value of the IP and what the comps are, the team, a teaser we would create. On A Tale Dark and Grim, it's more understanding how an episode structure happens, if it's seasonal arc, does it have sequel potential because they want to build the brand. And I'll show you the deck. Again, the art factor is buyers want to see the world. They want to be impressed by our ability to show them what we're looking for. It's important to create a really strong deck, like good design on your deck, because if it feels a little bit amateurish, these guys, these buyers see a lot of pitches and they can tell a really good deck. So it's worth the money to make sure you have something strong. In the end, you always want to kind of say, again, the social message. Why are we doing this story? Why are we telling it now? Why is it relevant to what's happening in the world today? This book that I'm taking development on, called Max in the Land of Lies, is about a Jewish boy who lived in Germany pre-World War II, and it's really relevant to some of the things that's happening in the world today. So we feel like we have a lot of interest just because of that fact. So this will be like, we can come back for any questions and answers, but what I want to do is, let me get out of this 1 second and get rid of this. Give me a sec. And I want to show you A Tale Dark and Grim. Okay, so I think I need to share screen again. Okay, so I'm going to show you, this is the deck that we took in to Netflix and sold the series on. Like, you can't really see it here, but there's actually fog. You can see the clouds are slowly drifting. This is an amazing deck builder. And immediately, I mean, at Netflix, they laughed. They go, "Is that fog animating?" I go, "Yeah." They go, "Oh, that's cool." So they knew. So The Tale Dark and Grim, the first thing we put in there, New York Times bestseller. We want to talk about the bona fides of the book. So we talk about the writer, Adam Gidwitz, New York Times bestseller, Newbery Honor winner, publishing awards, and goes on and on. I'm not going to pitch you the whole thing. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. He also has a podcast, and the podcast went on to be #1 on Apple Podcasts, and it's also about Grimm's Tales. We're telling this because we want Netflix to know Grimm's fairy tales are important. Grimm's fairy tales have an audience. We had bona fide book. This part of the pitch, Adam Gidwitz, who was in our pitch, who wrote the book, tells what inspired him to write the book. Here is a little, I'm going to skip this. This was a little animated piece that was made for the book that played on YouTube. We wanted to show that it's 3 books because we wanted them to think it has franchise potential. Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, all New York Times bestsellers. We wanted to show what were the comparable titles. Revolting Rhymes, because it has a certain level of quality we want to achieve. the series of unfortunate events because it's a Netflix series, but also because it has a narrator who breaks the fourth wall, talking to the audience, telling the audience, you don't want to see this. Don't watch this. It was just the gag. And we knew we were doing the same thing. And Goosebumps because it's a comedy and horror together. So we felt like these were our comps. Now we jump into the pitch. And this, again, you can see we created a little bit of movement in the artwork. We wanted to, this is a set piece, which gives immediately the tone and the feel of where the story takes place. It's Hansel and it's the Grimm's fairy tale. It's the deep, dark woods. These are our protagonists, Hansel and Gretel. These are done by an artist named Pete DeSette, who is one of the top character designers in our industry. And I knew Netflix was looking for Pete to do a job for them. These are our ravens who actually are the narrators who break the fourth wall. This is just studies of the ravens. I like to use all my artwork that I develop. Sometimes they're in the story. They're characters, and our characters in the story get information from them. So we go back and we start with Hansel and Gretel. They were children. They were really happy. Their parents were the king and queen. But we learned about this character named Faithful Johannes, who was loyal to the king and the king's favorite guard, who got turned to stone in a curse, like a Grimm's fairy tale. And the only way to undo this curse was for the king to cut off his children's heads. So in the first episode, Hansel and Gretel get their heads cut off. What happens? Okay, so how are we going to handle this? We decided to show an example from a Harry Potter movie where we show it in silhouette. We don't show details. We show it in a silhouette form of cutout animation. That's how we handle these things we call the grisly bits when their heads got cut off. And so they immediately understood that. So Hansel and Gretel get their heads put back on, but they decide they can't live with their parents anymore, so they run away. And now we talk about our characters, Hansel and Gretel, their strengths, their weaknesses, Hansel, Gretel, and then the story goes on. The first episode, they meet the baker woman. Hansel and Gretel meet this baker woman, which is the famous Hansel and Gretel story. And she loves to eat children. So we have a little study again about their baker woman. We're giving some story, a lot more artwork about the first episode. And this is the set piece. Like I told you, we need a set piece. This is where the baker woman's about to trick them to go into the oven. So she's going to cook them. They escape and they go on their second adventure where they go on this big hike across the world and get up to the top of a mountain. They go into an enchanted woods where this tree has a face on it that says, you can stay in these woods. You can take anything you want, but don't take more than you need. And Hansel gets cursed by these mysterious woods, and Hansel turns into a beast boy. So we did this through a series of cross dissolves, little 4-frame cross dissolves where Hansel turns into a beast boy. And we also had our set designer, production designer, do a nice color set piece of Hansel now turned into a beast. What happens in this episode is Hansel gets killed. Okay, so Gretel's all alone. She has the ravens give her some advice, and she goes off and meets this warlock character who actually is evil, but he's charming. So they kind of have a romance. She finds out that he's actually capturing girls and stealing their souls. So she kills him and runs away. We find out now that Hansel didn't die, that he's inside this beast. Okay, so now we do Hansel's separate story. He's got a stepfather who's a nice guy, but he has a gambling problem, and he loses Hansel in a gambling debt to the devil. So this is the devil and his grandmother. And what happens in this episode is Hansel has to go to hell, and he has to escape from hell. And so this is our, again, a little movement on here. Hansel and Gretel get reunited after he escapes from hell, and they decide to go back home to their parents and find that their kingdom is in ruins. It's been being attacked by a dragon. We find out, I can't tell you the whole story, but we find out that the dragon is actually their father, the king, and they have to cut his head off. So this is a great set piece of Gretel fighting the dragon, riding on its back. And the moon is a character here. The moon bites the dragon. All this stuff happens in this episode. So then we say, if you want to know how it ends, you have to buy the show. Then we talk about the team, Astronomical, had these shows under our belts. Novo Media, Simon Otto was our supervising director who came out of DreamWorks, and I knew that Netflix wanted Simon really badly on a project, and he was in our pitch. Brenda Chapman would be an episode director. Pete DeSev is this designer that we knew they wanted. Richie Chavez, who did our set pieces, again, an industry professional. And then this was left up on the wall for the longest time. Each vertical column is an episode, so that we knew what the whole season was going to look like. This was a big deal. They really loved this. So this was basically the pitch that we used to sell that to Netflix. And it worked, like I told you, trying to get out of this. So one more thing I can show you is just a simple one sheet that is something that we use when we take a movie out and show potential buyers. This is just very simple. It's called the one sheet. Are you able to see this? So this is the movie called Mean Margaret, which we're developing. This shows a little bit about the character. What we basically do here is we have a short summary. We talk about what's involved. We have a script. That's important to them. We talk about who wrote it, what they've done. Character designs by Carter Goodrich, someone very well known. Director, Simon Otto, a rising director. Producers, a budget, production pipeline, schedule, distribution strategy, casting suggestions, financing status, where we have some money committed from different groups, what the finance plan looks like, proof of concept teaser. This is like the legalese about the distribution of profits, and then some examples of some visual development that we're kind of looking at right now. So that is how we show a movie. And last but not least, I want to show one quick thing, because I told you I would show you what a pie chart looks like. And this pie chart explains how profits are divided up. And this is important when you're pitching something. This is a show you probably are familiar with. And this is sort of an overview, the brand, the IP, the bona fides of the brand, synopsis of the story, more on the concept, strength of the script. It already has a script, so we're selling that. The financials, again, I told you, we really need to kind of have projections, what the finance plan looks like, what the budget is, what kind of investment we already have raised, what we're asking for in this particular deck. Again, you might recognize this. I showed you before, Nash Services doing comparables. And these are the 20 movies that they used to determine those numbers. And this is sort of so this is an interesting chart. This shows the green is revenue and the red are expenses. So you have the international box office minus distribution fees and expenses over here. Domestic box office, the exhibitor takes 50%. Then you have your marketing expenses. Then you have your distribution fees. And then over here you have DVD, pay TV, streaming. Again, you have distribution fees. Then it goes into recoupment, and then you have your net profits. So this next slide is the pie chart that I wanted to show you, which is, it's basically a 50-50 split. You have your investors group where they own 50% of 100. It's divided by how much money they put into it. We had two investors at $8.5 million each. Our total budget was going to be 19 million in equity. So this 2.5 had 6%. These two both had 22% of 50%. Over here is the producer's 50%. The production company retains a portion. The third-party participants are your writers, your directors, your actors who have some back end. The IP owner gets a piece. And each of these small slivers are people who brought funds, P&A investor, your distributors want some small pieces. The company from the soft money, the Canadian company, is going to get some back in. So this is how profits are shared between the participants who are involved. So with that, let me get rid of this. I can now say if there's any questions.
네,
you
제가
mind?
잠깐, Chris, just give minutes, okay? So,
Yeah.
여러분들 한 50분 정도 지금 했으니까요. 금방 제가 자막창에서 간단한 답변들은 드리고, 그다음에 궁금한 거, 저도 한글 자막으로 번역이 나오는 줄 알았는데 영어로 나와서 혹시라도 불편하셨던 분들은 누구도 물어보셨는데 나중에 이메일로도 질문을 하시고, 제가 알기로는 전 콘진 쪽에 물어봐야 되는데 그 녹음된 거를 또 한글로 또 번역도 가능할 것 같은데 뭐 등등등 해서 제대로 이해를 하기 위해서는 이런 주제를 가지고 사실은 50분 안에 한다는 것 자체가 좀 굉장히 무리고, 크리스도 이 자료를 제가 많이 준비를 해줬는데 빨리 서둘렀어도 뭐 서둘러서 하느라고 뒷부분은 자세히 못한 것 같은데, 질문 지금 하실 수 있는 분들은 간략하게 하시고, 안 되는 부분들은 지금이든 나중이든 콘진 통해서 한글이든 영어든 이건 정말 내가 좀 알아야 되겠다. 알면 쉽지만 사실은 좀 복잡합니다. 할리우드는 워낙 시장이 전 세계를 무대하기 때문에 개발 과정도 그렇지만 오늘 또 뒤에 보니까 IP 및 그 파이낸스, 뭐 수익 구조, 수익 배분 등에 대해서까지 어느 정도는 약간 터치를 해서 굉장히 방대한데, 궁금한 점들은 지금 또는 나중에 주시면 뭐 한글이든 영어든 답변을 드리도록 하겠습니다.
So Jay, you can also, if there's a question about sharing some stuff that they've developed, and you can just give my email address and I'll have a look. I'll take a look at it, Jay. I'm happy to. Okay.
Yeah. Are you looking at some questions from
Right.
Jean in Korean
Yes.
and English as well? Thanks
Yeah.
for, the uploading in
Right.
English. But my name
Right.
is Writer. Develop
Yeah.
children's fantasy animation series that includes some hybrid. Okay, I also have English version available. Would you be waiting to share my? Oh, absolutely. Okay, so
Sure. Yeah.
Chris, you can answer. Okay.
Why don't you can you give my email address there, Jay, to
Oh
to
yeah,
the
yeah,
group?
yeah, yeah, yeah. She already, answered that. She has already emailed me
Okay.
through LA Coca Center and
Okay.
applied for overseas consultant. Okay, no problem. I'll handle that. Okay.
Yeah.
And Chris, oh yeah, me and Chris. 제 작품, my question for Mr. and Ms. Chris, that would be possible to directly share my work with you for consulting or management consideration. That's
hmm
that's work. Okay, so
hmm
질문 주신 분 하여간 주시면 이메일 주소 받았고 저하고 크리스하고 협의해서 다음 단계를 뭘 해야 될지를 하겠습니다. 어느 더 질문 마이클 정, 나무 애니메이션. Thanks for making this meeting. Will you able to see the relay?
Yeah, I think
Zoom call?
I think it's recorded. So yeah, I think you can have.
오케이.
Right.
오케이. 예, 좋습니다. 하여간 이렇게 간단한 질문 주시면 하여간 긴 거는 나중에 팔로우업을 하시고, 금방 질문 주신 분은 뭐 자세히 많이 주셔서 할 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Right.
Another question about social message. Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay. What I would say is, Jay, I was developing with the group in England about social children's mental health,
Yep.
and it is very similar to it. I don't know if it's playing in Korea, but on Netflix there's a series called Adolescence. It's just 4 parts, but it's really, really powerful. It shows how children are using social media to kind of get their own self-worth and so, it's not healthy. And so we try to show different reasons. What happens in this case is I'm not an expert in things like mental health, but when we do create a show, there are experts in the mental health world who are available to be consulting on these kinds of projects. Like when I was involved with developing it for a British company, one of the people on our team was a specialist in children's mental health. So he was able to identify a number of stories and settings. Then we created small stories that went around those social issues. But off the top of my head, I don't think I can list what they were. It's a little challenging for me. I just say there are specialists in this area. Let's see.
Yeah, next. 길게 답변 못 드려도 이해를 하시고 시간이 없으니까 일단 아까 윤리 작가, 마이클 정 답변 드렸고 제니슬리 금방 소셜 메시지 하셨고 그다음에 넷플릭스 질문을 유저 누군지 모르겠지만 애니메이션 이건 답이 좀 뭐 제가 답할 수 있겠지만 답이 길고 굉장히 어려운 그것이 스프리트 I mean the complicated questions I mean
Yeah.
what okay so I mean 나중에 기회 되면 제가 우리말로 천천히 들을 수 있겠지만 Chris if you can you can make a quick I mean reply in a few seconds but
to which question, Jay?
the last one another one sorry the last one English from user I don't know name but
user when it comes to pitching
yeah
what are your most important factors you look for example more about the strength of the story and the script, the experience of the production team, the uniqueness of the visual style, or the reliability of the production pipeline. I think strength of story and the strength of the IP comes back to being very important. You have to make the buyer understand why you like this IP. Either it's a book you loved or you believe in the story strongly and you think you can make this story appealing. It's about your passion for the project. So I think that's probably the most important thing is making a buyer understand that I believe in this project. I believe that it's really important that this story is told because people need to laugh or people need to understand what's happening in the world today. In some of these books that I'm looking at that are more relevant stories, I think that I'm pretty passionate about. Trying to find something that maybe has a message about fixing our climate, for example. I believe that children realize that the climate isn't the world, climate's important, and they want to see stories that they can help them feel like they can do something. So then that's something I would be passionate about. And when I would be selling this to Netflix, they would have to sense my passion, So I think that's kind of important. Let's see. Picking a piece to produce. Yeah, I think it's about, for me, first it's what's the story, and then I look at it and go, do I have a chance with this one? Because is it a brand that's original? Is it a brand that's emerging? Is it a brand that's New York Times bestseller level? That's my sort of sweet spot, because we're not able to secure the rights to Batman or something like that. That belongs in the big studio space. So for me, it's about finding something like these books that were New York Times bestsellers. For me too, because I worked with an author of a book and I included him in the development, he was so happy, because a lot of times an author of a book is not included in the development because the producers think the author will be too precious about the story. But I wanted this author involved, and Netflix wanted this author involved. So it was the right decision. And because of that author has now let me contribute, be a partner in his next book, his podcast. So we build relationships through these development processes. And it's even better if you sell something together. And A Tale Dark and Grim got nominated for an Emmy. So we were really, it was really a special project for us. So let's see. Yeah, I think that those are kind
오케이,
of.
오케이. 지금 죄송하지만 질문을 또 두세 개 남아있는데 거기까지만 끊겠습니다. 시간 관계상. 아까 말씀드린 대로 추가로 하는 이메일이나 하시면 되고, Chris, there are two Korean questions in one English. Maybe you can take a look at the question from Stella.
Mm-hmm.
What's the most important thing for you when you are picking up a piece of produce? I mean,
Right.
it's a general question, but I mean,
Yeah.
you may want to answer. I can
I
handle
think-
the other two Korean questions.
Yeah. I think it is what I just said. It is about if I'm passionate about the story, if I really believe in it, if I believe it has a chance for being successful, like it comes from the research. You'll find that they are not buying preschool, but they are buying adult animation. So then you have to kind of go look, what do I have that could be adult animation? This could work. So sometimes you have to sort of reverse engineer your decision on what you choose based on what you think has the best chance of being sold, to a buyer. And sometimes it's about, I believe so much in this story that I'm going to find the buyer, and I'm going to be very persistent. I will persevere until I find the buyer. On this project called Max in the Land of Lies, I actually think that Steven Spielberg would like this story. So I have a relationship, Jay, with Wayfarer, who actually knows Amblin. So I'm going to go to Wayfarer first, and I'm going to pitch him this project. The first thing I did on Max in the Land of Lies is working with the author. We developed the writing. It's 2 books. We broke the books down into 8 episodes. Okay, we have that. Then I needed visual development. So I reached out to a Dutch company called Submarine, who have made a lot of projects, movies and series. I know them. They read the books. They said, yes, this is a good project for us. So now we agreed to a collaboration agreement. Remember, chain of title is very important. So we put a deal between ourselves. We can't just have them start giving us visuals without some kind of deal in place. Otherwise, you're going to have a chain of title problem. So we get it. We have a collaboration agreement, which we've gone back and forth with a little bit. We have a meeting on it Monday. We think we've solved it. Then they'll start giving us the visuals that will be like the pitch deck I showed you for A Tale Dark and Grim. We're going to go into Netflix. Netflix knows us because we've given them a series. We're pitching this. But we might, before we go to Netflix, go to Wayfarer and then go to Amblin and then say, will Steven Spielberg like to be an executive producer on this? Because it's in a message that we know he loves. It's very important for him. The Jewish situation in Germany pre-World War II is very powerful for story points. Now, this Max in the Land of Lies is for animation. So we're treating it like 1010. Jay, is 1010 known in Korea? Okay. Is it called 1010?
I don't know what it is.
Oh, you don't know 1010?
Oh.
Yeah, it's like a European. Spielberg made a feature film of 1010.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's animated, but it kind of looks realistic animation. But anyway, that's the tone, so we have to establish the tone. It's a comedy with a spy thriller, and then, so I'm going to package it with our team, maybe Spielberg, maybe Wayfarer, maybe Prince Harry, because we know they want to do something with animation. And then we go into one of the buyers and say, this is the team behind this. It's a New York Times bestseller. So, I think we have a chance at it. So that's how I pick something.
Okay, there are 2 more quick the questions, and let's try to wrap up for today. Okay. First question from 비바필름의 이정호 대표님. One of the questions. What's your idea? What's your, the thought about creating character design using AI? What's the angle from the production and investor's perspective? Is it positive or still? So it's a very, the timely questions, but what's your,
I think it's a very good question. Look, AI, there's pros and cons to AI. One, the pros are that you can do a lot of visual development really fast that normally you have to pay a lot of money for to individual artists. So that hurts the individual artists, but it allows us to do a lot of visual exploration. Now, you cannot take visual development from AI and then take it into Netflix and pitch it. They will not allow it. They won't
No
have
way.
you, you cannot even come in their office. They ask you before you come in, did you read our rules about AI? So everybody knows there are rules against that. Because what AI does is it takes all this information, it scrapes the web, and then it gives you stuff. But nobody got paid of the work that it learned from. So what I like to do is I take AI for visual exploration, and then we hire artists and say, we like this style, we like this look, we like this feel. And then the artists will give us their interpretation of that. And then we pay the artists, and the artists, for chain of title, will sign a contract with us. That's a work for hire agreement. So AI is going to be used in many things. Visual development was one of the first things. I don't believe AI is going to be able to tell original stories anytime soon. I don't believe AI can animate, but I do believe AI will be a tool that animators use. Okay? I think AI now is like when CG, computer animation, came into our world. And there were only 2D animators before that. And the 2D animators said, oh, computers can never animate, not get character and not get emotion. And then other animators said, I think it's a tool and I think it can do that. And the animators who embraced CG continue to work. And the animators who said it'll never work, they had less options. They only stayed in 2D, So I believe AI will be a tool for the next 3 or 4 years. And who knows what will happen after that? It's anybody's guess.
Okay, great answer. Okay, so
good question.
yeah, of course. I mean, the final question about let's see, from Pellan Pictures. Quick translated that the Netflix is going to, the fund 100%, no revenue share. Okay, and they own the rights for a while. But I'm just wondering that kind of deal, is preferred by the producers in Hollywood as well.
Okay.
That's exactly what we are facing every day, right?
Yeah. It's another really good question.
Yeah.
Because there's two ways, you can do this. One is you sell it to Netflix and they finance it, and you're green. You have a green light, but you don't get as much upside. It's all about your risk. If you want more risk, you'll have more upside. If you take the Netflix deal, it's less risk, less upside, less profit. But they do pay a premium because they know they're taking away your upside. So you get the premium and you get a green light. So you get to make it and you earn producer fees. And like Jace, after a while, it reverts back to the IP owner, but it might be 10 years. And so, that's one scenario. The other scenario is you try to find a buyer in England and a buyer in Germany and a buyer in Africa and a buyer in Australia. And then you find a piece of equity and then you bring in the soft money, the tax credits, and you try to finance it that way. That's another scenario. That's more risk, but it's more upside. So the risk and the upside are equally proportioned, I would say. So it's really about your appetite for risk. I think in a lot of cases, people are just happy to get a green light and produce their show. And they say, I'll take it, rather than take the risk. And because it's a big risk. If you had an option to take the Netflix, if Netflix said, I'll green light this, I'll finance it. And you said, I have an option to do that, or I can go try and sell it through 3 major key territories. And you believe in it. I think most people are going to take the Netflix deal.
That's easier.
It's a bird in the hand. We call it in English, Jay, a bird in the hand or 2 in the bush.
Exactly.
You must have a Korean expression for the same thing.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. So 이 정도로 제 질문은 여기서 마치는 걸로 하고, 혹시라도 그 크리스가 답한 거를 제대로 혹시 이해를 못하셨다면 그것도 나중에 포함시켜 주시면 나중에 영어로든 한글로든 보완 설명을 드리도록 약속을 드리고, 그다음 한 가지 추가하자면 아까 넷플릭스에 그 AI 얘기 나왔었는데, 그렇지 않아도 엊그저께 넷플릭스에서 AI 그 가이드라인을 발표했는데, 제가 그거는 한국에서 알아야 된다 싶어가지고, 제가 한 장으로 요약해 놓은 게 있어서 한국에서 좀 공유를 하려고 그랬는데, 지금 제가 바빠가지고, 또 조만간 공유할 수 있는지 보고해서, 팔로우업 해드렸습니다. 그러면, 예, 마지막은 콘진원에서 마무리하시고, 문자 보내셨네. 텍스트로. 자료 다 업로드 예정이고, 오케이. 마지막 질문이 송다운님, 이메일 알려서 주시나요? 이메일이 누군지 모르겠지만, 그건 콘진하고 하여간 협의해서, 제가 하니까 저희는 할 수 있는 범위 내에서 한국식으로 최대한 AS를 할 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 예, 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다.
Yeah, so Jay, feel free to pass over my
Oh yeah,
email.
I've talked to the guys that feel free to send any questions, unanswered, whatever, and I'm gonna put together and I'll try to follow with Chris. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Sounds
great.
good.
Okay. 그럼 이만 들어가겠습니다. 끝난 것 같습니다.
Okay. Thank you. We're done? That's it?
Yeah. You may leave. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you. Thanks, Jay. See you later.
감사합니다.
Bye. 감사합니다. Bye-bye.